Hey there, friends. I'm so happy you stopped by. Today, I'm sharing 20 of my favorite fall and autumn DIYs. Once again, I used mostly Dollar Tree supplies and a few other things. I really hope you enjoy them, so let's get busy. I'm using one of these plastic serving dishes from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to flip it over, and on the bottom side, I'm painting it with my orange acrylic paint. When it's dry, I'm then going to use some of the Dollar Tree nautical rope, and using my glue gun, I'm hot gluing it around the bottom edge of the tray. When I'm done, I'm using the same jute that I used in the past projects, and it actually came from a Dollar Tree planter that I used in making this treats container. And after you finish the playlist, if you want to come back, you can check out how I made it. Now that it kind of looks like a pumpkin, I'm going to use that Dollar Tree planter jute, measure it, and cut the jute to make the lines that you see on a pumpkin. As I'm measuring the jute, I'm cutting a piece for each side, and then using my hot glue gun, I'm going to attach them both at a slight angle. While you're adding on your pieces, you don't have to be super fussy because most of the pumpkin will be covered with a sign. When I was done adding the jute, I then spot tacked the center of each piece onto the tray. To help hold the jute in place and protect the orange finish, I'm giving it a complete coat of Mod Podge. Now that it's dry, I'm going to use another piece of my driftwood for the stem, and you can always just use a flat piece of wood for this part. I'm turning my pumpkin over and using a good amount of E6000, I'm attaching it to the back. Now that it's set up overnight and the stem is tightly in place, I'm going to add on a bow. I used these 3 different ribbons from the Dollar Tree. I used my bow maker and made a 6-inch bow. I then wrapped my bow around the stem and hot glued it into place. The Dollar Tree has so many cute signs you can add to this pumpkin, and I found this metal harvest blessing sign, so I removed it from the metal stem. Then once again, just using my E6000, I attached it to the front of the pumpkin. Now that the sign has dried in place, I'm going to add on a few of the Dollar Tree leaves as accents. Then to finish up, I added on a small hanger to the back of my pumpkin. I used some of that same jute and my E6000, and I let it set up overnight. And with that, my Dollar Tree Harvest Blessings pumpkin is complete. To start my second project, I need 4 dice, so I'm using 2 packages from the Dollar Tree. I'm turning them into pumpkins, and I picked up some random sticks in my yard to use as stems. I'm kind of judging the size, and I'm then using my scissors to make a hole in the dice large enough to accommodate the stems. Once I'm done making all the holes, I'm then using some of this orange acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree, and I'm giving all 4 dice 2 coats. Now that my pumpkins are dry, I'm going to add the stems, and I cut each one of them about 4 inches in length. To attach them, I'm using some E6000. I placed a small amount in the top opening, and then I pushed the stem into place. To add the lettering onto my pumpkins, I'm using these poster stickers from the Dollar Tree. I cut out the word fall, and then I simply peeled off each of the letters and I added them to my pumpkins. And now that my pumpkins spell out the word fall, I want to add some tendril accents to the top. I'm using some of this Dollar Tree jute and a couple of skewers, and I'm just taping a piece to the top of one of the skewers, and then I'm wrapping the jute around it tightly. Once I'm done, I cut away the excess jute and I add a piece of tape to attach it to the end of the skewer. I made 2 skewers, and to make the pumpkin tendrils, I'm using my Mod Podge and a foam brush, and then I'm basically soaking the jute. Once I'm done, I want to make some of the tendrils green, so I'm using some of that same pretty sage green that I used on my truck. Then, like I did with the Mod Podge, I just used my foam brush and I kind of soaked the jute with the green paint. When both of the skewers were completely dry, I then removed the tape from the ends, and then I just twisted the jute off. I then stretched out both ends just to get a bit of a longer curl. I then placed both pieces next to my pumpkin, decided about how long I wanted them to be, and using my hot glue gun, I attached them in place. Once all the tendrils are in place, I'm going to use some of these Dollar Tree fall leaves as an accent. I picked 2 yellow and 2 green, and to add them to the top of my pumpkin, I'm just going to notch out a little piece in the center. I then added a little dot of hot glue and I wrapped the leaf around the stem. With my pumpkins complete, I'm now going to make the display stand, and I'm using 2 of the Dollar Tree wooden crates. To make the feet for my stand, I'm using 8 of the tumbling tower blocks, and these also came from the Dollar Tree. I'm using my Starbound thick glue to attach 2 of the blocks together. It sets up super fast, and if you'd like to try it out, I have the company link below along with a coupon code. I'm making 4 legs in total, and all I'm doing is adding some of my Starbond glue on one side and then placing a block on top. I'm painting my crates white, orange, and navy blue, and the feet the same matching navy blue. Now that they're dry, I'm attaching the 2 together using my E6000. I used a piece of painter's tape to hold them together, and then I attached my feet with the same E6000. Once it's completely dry, I'm going to be adding on a ribbon accent, and this is completely optional. I found this really pretty blue and white check ribbon at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use my glue gun and attach it around the center of my display. Now that the ribbon is attached to my display stand, I'm going to use the same ribbon and make a small bow. I then used my glue gun and attached it to my first pumpkin stem. I'm adding the word vibes to the front of my stand, and this part's completely optional. I printed this out on my Cricut, but if you don't have a Cricut, you could always use some of the lettering from the Dollar Tree. The last accent that I added to my stand is a small bow that I made out of the same ribbon. To finish up my fall vibes project, all I needed to do was add my pumpkins, and when I was done, my project was then complete. I'm starting my truck sign by using one of these unfinished wood trucks from the Dollar Tree. I removed the hang tag, and now I'm going to paint the body with this pretty sage green. When I was done, I used this pretty golden brown acrylic paint, and I painted the wood on the truck's bed. I want to make the fenders on my truck a little bit darker, so I'm just using a spot of black acrylic paint, and I'm going to mix it with some of my green sage. Once I'm done, I have a shade just a bit darker, and then I'm painting both of the fenders. When I'm done, I'm using the same Dollar Tree black acrylic paint, and I'm just painting the tires that classic black color. And now that I have both of my tires painted, I'm using my white acrylic paint and I'm going to paint the center inside rims. And to finish up, I'm using some of the orange acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree to paint my two pumpkins. When I was done, I thought the truck definitely needs some hubcaps, so I dug through my button jar. I was trying to find something that might work, and I did find these two little silver buttons. I then used my glue gun to attach each one in the center of the wheels. I'm going to be adding on this little Farm Fresh pumpkin sign. I downloaded it from the internet and it's free to use, and I'll attach that link below in my description. To attach it, I used my Mod Podge and then I centered it in the door area. Now that it's in place, I want to frame out the sign so it kind of resembles the truck's door, and I'm going to use some skewers from the Dollar Tree. I measured it on the top of my paper sign, I marked it with a pencil, and then I cut two the exact same size. I then used my top skewer as a guide. I measured my side skewer, marked it with my pencil, and then cut two to size. When I was done, I placed the pieces around the sign to make sure they all fit, and then I also cut a small piece of skewer for above the window to cover the hang tag hole. I painted my cut pieces with that same pretty golden brown paint, and then I used the fender paint for the piece above the door. To attach all 5 pieces in place, I'm using this Aleene's tacky glue that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I added a line of glue around the sign to attach my pieces, and then I did the same to cover the hang tag hole on the top. With my truck complete, I'm going to be recycling one of these Christmas signs from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be working on the back. I removed the hang tag on the top, and then using my white acrylic paint, I gave it a complete coat. Once my sign is completely dry, I'm then going to give it a border using this pretty farmhouse buffalo check ribbon that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. To attach the ribbon to the sign, I'm going to use my Mod Podge. I added a thick coat to the end and then covered it with my ribbon. I turned my sign over and I attached the ends on the back using my Mod Podge. After my first piece was attached, I just worked my way around the sign until it had a border of my buffalo check ribbon. I recycled an old Dollar Tree sign for this project, but you could always use some cardboard or wood, and that would work great too. While my ribbon is drying, I'm going to paint this harvest sign, and I found it in this 3-pack of fall signs that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I'm painting it with the mixed color that I ended up using on the fenders. I gave it a complete coat of paint, and then when it dried, I ended up giving it a second. Once my sign was dry, I really want to add a little texture, so I'm using the same golden brown paint and the back of my paintbrush, and I'm just adding some random dots here and there. Before I put my truck together, I'm going to use these 3 pumpkins that I found on this pumpkin filler at the Dollar Tree. I removed them from the stem, and then using my knife, I cut all 3 in half. They're made of styrofoam, and to cover the imperfections that showed once I cut them, I'm going to use some of the Dollar Tree orange acrylic paint and give all 6 of them a coat. Now that all my pieces are ready, it's time to put the sign together. I'm using some E6000, I'm adding it onto the back of the truck and then attaching it to my sign. I'm now finding the placement for each of my pumpkins, and then using my hot glue gun, I'm attaching them to the sign. Once I have all my pumpkins in place, I'm just taking a few random pieces of raffia and I'm just kind of folding them in half and then folding them in half again. And then using my glue gun, I'm placing them in between each of the pumpkins. If you don't have any raffia on hand, you can always cut off some small pieces from the fall leaves, or you can use some jute or twine, anything to fill in the open spaces. Once all the spaces between the pumpkins are filled, I'm just using my scissors and giving the raffia a little haircut so that there's no loop showing. To add my harvest sign, I'm once again using my E6000. I'm placing a bit on the back and then attaching it to the sign. To add my hanger, I'm using some jute from the Dollar Tree. I knotted a piece into a loop, and then once again using my E6000, I attached the jute to the back of my sign. I then used some of my leftover raffia and I made a little bow, and then using my glue gun, I just attached it to the side of the jute hanger. And with that, my harvest truck sign is complete. To make my cart, I'm using one of the wooden crates from the Dollar Tree along with one of the tumbling tower blocks. I'm using my E6000 and attaching the tumbling tower block over one opening on the outside end of the crate. I cut 2 medium-sized craft sticks and I glued them over the opening on the inside of the crate. I'm using a small Dollar Tree dowel, so I'm making sure to leave a large enough opening. I'll be using 2 large skewers for this project, so I'm just going to snip off the end of one to make a handle for my cart. I'm adding the skewers to add some dimension. I'm measuring them and cutting 4 each in the width, the depth, and the length. And once again, I'm using my E6000 to attach them on the top, the bottom, and the sides. Once it had dried, I then gave the cart and the handle 2 coats of my white acrylic paint. Once it's completely dry, it's now time to attach the handle. I slipped the handle through the opening and marked where I wanted it to set. Then, using my scissors, I made 2 notches on the marked areas. I slid it through the opening and lined up the notches and then attached it in place with my E6000. When I was done, I then used 2 pieces of painter's tape to hold it in place until it's set up. I'm adding a different paper sign to each side. You can use anything you like. Both of these were free printables that I found on the internet. I attached one on each side using my Mod Podge. Once both sides were dry, I then used my X-Acto knife and I ran along the original lines in the crate. When both sides were done, I then used a pencil to accent where I had cut. Using that same pencil, I accented the back, the front, and all the sides. I'm using these tiny Dollar Tree letter stickers and I'm adding the word fall onto the back. I'm painting 8 water bottle caps. 4 are orange, 4 are red, and I'm also painting 3 small wooden beads. Turning the beads into apples, I'm using a snip of a twig for the stems, and all I did was add a little hot glue to the bottom and then I fed the stem up through. To make the leaves on the apple, I cut a piece from a silk leaf stem vein and then I glued it onto the top. Adding them to my little wagon cart, I just hot glued them into place. To add the same 3D effect to the other side, I'm cutting one of the Dollar Tree pumpkins in half. And it's as easy as just gluing it into place. For my wheels, I'm using 4 of these tin Dollar Tree storage containers and I'm spraying them with my black spray paint. Once they dry, and because the paint scratches off so easily, I'm giving each of them a coat of Mod Podge. Using my E6000, I glued 2 of the orange and 2 of the red caps onto the center of the tires. To accent the red and orange caps, I'm gluing buttons in the center of each. Using a screwdriver, I punched a hole in the center of my remaining bottle caps. I'm measuring 2 painted skewers on the bottom, and these will become the axle. I already have 2 wheels made, and to complete them, I'm sliding the red wheel cap onto the orange axle. I'm then adding some E6000 and attaching it to the tire. And now I'm sliding on the orange cap and attaching that to the red wheel axle. I let them both set up overnight, and now using my E6000, I attached them to the bottom of the cart, making sure that the orange caps were on the side of the pumpkin and the red on the side of the apples. Getting started on my mesh pumpkin, I'm using 2 of the hanging baskets from the Dollar Tree, and I simply removed both of the chains. To get my pumpkin shape, I'm attaching them together with some zip ties. I placed one on top of the other and made sure to line up the hanger loops. I used 6 zip ties, and that seemed to hold the 2 baskets together pretty tightly. Once they were in place, I snipped off the excess ends. I don't have any orange spray paint on hand, so I'm just going to paint it with my orange acrylic paint. To attach the mesh, I'm using 18 chenille stems, and you can find these at the Dollar Tree. On the top and the bottom of the form, there are 9 supports, so I'm placing a chenille stem in between each of them. I'm just wrapping it around the wire and giving it a quick twist. Once my top is complete, I then do the same thing on the bottom. Once I'm done, I'm then placing a dot of hot glue on each twist to help hold them in place. To wrap my pumpkin, I'm starting with 2 orange rolls of mesh from the Dollar Tree, and I'll end up using 4. I'm gathering together both ends of the mesh, and then I'm keeping them side by side. I placed my gathered end between one of the chenille stems and then twisted it in place tightly. To be sure it stays in place, I then added on a dot of hot glue. On the bottom stem where the mesh is attached, I'm moving directly above it to the top stem. I'm now attaching my mesh in between those chenille stems and twisting them together tightly. I fold my mesh over and attach it to the next set of chenille stems, and then from the top, I'm now moving down to the bottom to the next set of chenille stems. Adding on the 2 layers of mesh, I'm working top to bottom, attaching them to the chenille stems and basically covering my form. While I'm adding on my mesh, I'm also, because the form is just a light metal, making sure not to pull it too tight and to bend the form out of shape. I continued working my way around until my rolls of mesh were finished, and then I continued using my next 2 rolls, and I followed the exact same instructions. And when you finish wrapping your mesh, you'll have your finished pumpkin. To clean up the ends, all I did was snip off the chenille stems. I then tucked all the cut ends into the center. And after I did it on one end, I did the exact same thing on the other. I'm now moving around the outside and cleaning up, folding over the edges of the mesh to give it more of that pumpkin-like appearance. I'm using a piece of the Dollar Tree green mesh to mimic some leaves. I measured it and decided how long I wanted them to be. I cut it, gathered it together, and then hot glued it over the top. I'm using some of the Dollar Tree fall leaves to cover the opening, and I'm just randomly hot gluing them into place. I'm going to add on some tendrils that you normally see hanging off of pumpkins. I'm using polished hemp. You can use Dollar Tree jute and 2 wooden skewers. To give the hemp its corkscrew shape, I'm using some watered down Mod Podge. I taped the hemp onto the skewer and then I just twisted it around. When I came to the end, I taped the hemp and I made 2 skewers. Using my diluted Mod Podge, I gave them each a coat. When they were dry, I cut the ends off. I wiggled them around a little bit and then I slid them off the skewers. Adding the tendrils is super easy. I just decided how long I wanted them to be, cut them to size, and then hot glued them up under the leaves. I'm adding a bow onto my pumpkin and I'm using some of this pretty fall plaid ribbon that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I'm making an old school loopy bow, or you can use your bow maker. If you'd like to make an old school bow like I'm making, I'll have a video linked below to show you how I make it. When I'm done, I then secure it all together with a piece of floral wire and then fluff out the loops. I clipped off the ends of my 2 tails and then using my glue gun, I attached it to the center of the pumpkin. Now that my bow's secured in place, I'm adding on some extra fall leaf accents and I'm just kind of hot gluing them in here and there. You can use just about anything for the pumpkin stem, and I'm using this old piece of wood that I picked up outside. You can always leave it natural if you like. I'm using the same hemp that I used for the tendrils, and I'm going to completely wrap the stem. I continued on adding hot glue and the hemp until the stem was completely covered. To attach my stem, I'm adding some hot glue into the opening around the leaves and behind the bow, and then attaching it into place. To finish off my project, I'm adding in some of these Dollar Tree berry accents. I made some little corkscrews in the wire and then I cut them at different lengths. To finish up this project, I then, using my glue gun, randomly attached them around the top of the pumpkin. I'm starting my getting ready for fall project by using this old piece of wood that I found. It measures 12 inches in length and 5.5 inches in width. It's definitely seen better days, so I took a piece of sandpaper and I just gave it a good sanding. Once the surface was smooth, I painted it completely with my khaki acrylic paint. I didn't repair any of the imperfections on the wood. I wanted this to be more of a rustic scarecrow. I thought the imperfections may give it a little more character. Once the paint was completely dry, it was then time to add the face. I decided to give my scarecrow oval eyes, so I'm using 2 of these 0 stickers as my template. I found the center and then placed them on the wood. I then traced them, and you can definitely do this freehand. It was just easier for me to get both of the ovals the exact same size. When I was done, I removed the stickers and my eyes are ready to paint. I then used my black acrylic paint to fill in the scarecrow's eyes. Once the black paint had dried, I'm now going to use some white acrylic paint to give the eyes an expression. I used a thinner paintbrush and made 2 half moons on the outside edge. Then using the back of my paintbrush, I added 2 dots. I drew on 2 eyebrows and used it as a guide for my paintbrush. For the nose, I cut out a triangular piece of paper and used that as my template. Once I was done, I used a spice orange paint to fill in the triangle. Once my orange paint dried, I then added some little black stitch accents on the nose. Using the same paintbrush, I then free-handed a mouth. I'm giving the scarecrow some hair by using some raffia that I had on hand. I grabbed a handful and then tied it in the center with another piece of raffia. Then using my glue gun, I attached it to the top of the head. Then using my scissors, I gave it a little bit of a haircut. To make the hat, I'm using some fabric that I already had on hand. To cut out the brim, I'm going to use a 12-inch dinner plate as my template. I'm using this cardboard triangle. It measures approximately 7 by 16 inches. You'll need to cut out 4 of these for the hat. I used it for some GNOME hats that I made, and I'll actually link that video above in case you'd like to check them out. Now that everything's cut out, we're going to hot glue the pieces together. I normally would sew these, but today I'm going to attach them together with my glue gun. After applying the glue, I'm going to lay one of the other triangles on top of it. I follow the same instructions until all 4 pieces are attached. I place a bead of glue on the last triangle. I then fold over the edge of the first triangle and attach them together. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because scarecrows are definitely not perfect. To figure out how big I need the hole to fit the hat over the scarecrow's head, I placed it against it and then used my scissors to poke a couple of holes in the fabric as a reference. Then using my scissors and the reference points, I cut out the center. Attaching the top part of the hat to the brim, place a bead of hot glue on the edge of the fabric, then slightly fold the bottom of the hat and place it on the hot glue. You're going to continue doing this as you move around the opening, and if it looks like you're going to have a little bit extra fabric, just kind of gather it when you're hot gluing it into place. Give the hot glue a few minutes to set up, and then we're going to turn the hat inside out. To give it more of a rustic farmhouse look, I'm going to fray up the edges. This is completely optional, but I really like the way that it looks. I'm using some burlap from the Dollar Tree and some ribbon I had on hand. I'm wrapping the burlap around the hat where we attached it together to get my measurements. I'm then cutting off both the top and the bottom finished edge. Once I'm done, I'm fraying up both sides. Once again, this is completely optional. I just really like the way it looks. I'm then gluing the burlap in the center of the hat where I attached the brim and the top part together. The fun part about this project is it's a trash to treasure, so you can use just about anything that you have on hand. You could use yarn or twine for the hair and mix and match different patterns of fabric. Once that's done, using some black ribbon, I'm attaching that in the center of the burlap. I'm adding some raffia to the hat, so I'm snipping off about 2 inches on the top. I'm making the raffia for the hat just like I did for the hair. Once I'm done, I'm pushing the loose ends out of the top. Then, so they won't move, I'm securing them into place with my glue gun. I'm not stuffing the hat, but I'm just filling it with some of the loose raffia just to give it a little bit of fullness. With the hat complete, we're now sliding it over the scarecrow's head. Once I have it exactly where I want it, I'm then hot gluing it into place. I'm adding this cute sunflower as an accent. I folded one corner of the brim, I hot glued it into place, and then I placed my sunflower. I also ended up adding a little leaf under the flower. To finish up the project, I'm adding a couple of jute accents. I made some figure eights with the jute about 8 inches long, then tied it around the top of the hat. I then separated the jute into some loops. To make his bow tie, I figured about how large I wanted it, and then once again, I just made a bunch of figure eights in the jute. I added a little tie of twine to the center to hold it together. Then to finish it off, I used a piece of the coordinating fabric and I just hot glued it around the little center tie. I hot glued it into place and our scarecrow is complete. I'm starting my next project by using one of the Dollar Tree wooden hangers. And I'm also going to be using 18 of the tumbling tower blocks. I'm starting with 12 of them and I'm going to attach them together using my Starbond thick glue, which if you follow me, you know this is my go-to glue for all my unfinished wood projects. It sets up super quick and I have the company linked below along with a coupon code in case you'd like to check it out. I'm using my glue and I'm attaching all 12 of the blocks together. To attach my base to the hanger, I'm once again adding some of my Starbond thick glue and I'm attaching the two pieces together. They set up in probably 2 to 3 minutes and now I'm attaching 2 blocks standing up onto the front and 2 blocks to each side. When my 2 front and my 4 side blocks are in place, I'm then adding 2 blocks and attaching them to the base and the back of the hanger for some extra support. With my base complete, I'm removing the original hanger and using my white acrylic paint, I'm giving it a coat. I set that aside to dry and now I'm recycling a tin can. I'm using a plain and a printed burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I wrapped the plain burlap around the can and cut it to size and then cut a second piece. I used my glue gun and attached one piece around the can and then slightly overlapped my second piece and I attached that as well. I then measured and cut a piece of the printed burlap. I then attached that around the center to hide the seams. I'm adding on a bow and I took about an 8-inch piece of the burlap ribbon. I folded one end into the center and then the other I folded over slightly overlapping the first. I then took a small piece of burlap and I tied it around the center to hold my bow together. I then took about a 3-inch piece of the printed burlap ribbon, folded over the sides. I added some hot glue to the bow and I wrapped it around the center. I then added a dot of hot glue to the front of my can and I popped the bow into place. To hold the succulents in place, I cut a piece of Sahara large enough to fill the can. I picked these pretty succulents up at the Dollar Tree, and after I removed the tags, I just placed them into the can. To hide the Sahara foam, I just tucked in a little bit of reindeer moss. I placed the can onto my hanger, replaced the jute hanger, and now it's ready to display. To make my rustic pumpkin, I'm starting with these little wooden pieces from the Dollar Tree. This project is so easy to make. I'm just hot gluing the pieces together. And I'm starting my base with 4. For the next row, I'm going to attach 5 pieces. Then my middle row will be 6 pieces. My next row will be 5 pieces and the top row will be 4. I've seen these pumpkins made with wine corks, so if you have any of those on hand, that would work great too. Now that we have our pumpkin constructed, I'm going to add a top coat of orange acrylic paint. I'm using a piece of orange Dollar Tree ribbon to wrap around the outside of the pumpkin. Then all I need to do is hot glue it into place. I'm using a piece of the green Dollar Tree burlap ribbon to use as the top leaves. I cut off each side and then frayed them a bit to give them more of a rustic look. I folded the ribbon in half and then angled the ends. After that, I secured the center with some floral wire so that it would resemble 2 leaves. I made a small bow out of some raffia and then I hot glued it to the top. I then attached my burlap leaves. To make the stem, I'm gluing 2 of the little wooden pieces together. To give it some texture, I'm wrapping it with my twine. When I'm done, I'm painting the stem with some brown acrylic paint, but this is completely optional. Now that it's dry, I'm attaching it to the top. And as my finishing touch, I just tied a little extra raffia around the stem. A quick haircut and this little rustic pumpkin cost me $1 to make. I'm using 3 glass containers from the Dollar Tree, and each of them has a lid. If you have containers at home with lids, those will work great too, and I'm just removing the lids off of each of mine. I'm painting my first pumpkin blue, and I'm making my own chalk paint. I'm adding about a tablespoon of blue acrylic paint and then 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Now that the paint and the baking soda are all mixed together, all that's left to do is to paint my jar. When my blue jar is completely covered, I'm then going to set it aside to dry, and I'm going to paint my next jar with my orange paint. I'm following the same recipe. I'm using about a tablespoon of orange acrylic paint, a teaspoon of baking soda, and once it's all mixed together, I'm then just painting my jar. One thing that I really did like about this jar is if you look at it, it really does look like a pumpkin. With my orange pumpkin painted, I'm putting that aside to dry. And now for my smallest jar, I'm making some white chalk paint. Once all 3 of my jars are painted and dry, I like to put them in a 250-degree oven for about 30 minutes. This is completely optional. I just really like the texture of paint once it's been baked onto the jars. For my lids, I'm adding in some pumpkin stems, and if you followed me at all for a little while, you know that I have tons and tons of driftwood, so I'm going to be using 3 pieces of that as my pumpkin stems. Another option is to head on outside and see if you can find some larger sticks, and you could also end up using a cork. For my smallest lid, I'm going to cut off that little center 3D top, and for the other 2 lids, I'm going to mark the center with a marker and then drill a large enough hole in those to accommodate my driftwood stems. And now that the holes are cut, I'm going to give them a coat of this pretty green acrylic paint. Once all my lids are painted and dried, on occasion I've had some paint scrape off of the metal, so what I like to do is give each of them a coat of Mod Podge, and that kind of helps keep the paint on the metal lids. With my lids all dry, it's now time to add in the stems, and this part is super easy. All I do is take each of my pieces of driftwood, I push them up through the center of the holes, and then using my hot glue gun, I attach each one of them into place. And now that I'm done, all that's left to do is attach the lids to the jars. If you're using corks for your stems, you can now continue on with me and decorate the tops. I'm adding some tendrils to my pumpkins, and I'm using some of this Dollar Tree wired jute cord. I want my tendrils to be the natural jute color, but also the color of the lids. So using this large skewer that I found at the Dollar Tree, I'm just going to wrap 1 package of the jute completely around it. After I have the jute completely wrapped around the skewer, I'm then using the same green paint as I used on the lids, and I'm painting the jute. If you can't find the wired jute, I did make some tendrils from regular jute in one of my past videos, and I'll link that below, so after you finish the playlist, come on back and you can check it out. When I was done, I let it dry completely and then slid it off the end of the skewer. I then used my natural jute and wrapped it around the same skewer to get that corkscrew appearance. Now that I have my 2 different colors of tendrils, I'm just measuring them against my pumpkin, deciding on how long I want them to be, and then just cutting them to size. I'm using 2 green and 1 natural, and then using my glue gun to attach them to the top of the lid. Now that they're attached in place, I'm going to use some of the same Dollar Tree leaves that I used in the first project, and I'm going to attach 2 of the green ones to the top. To me, they kind of mimic the leaves that you'd see on a pumpkin. I'm giving each of my pumpkins different bows, and I'm using some of this farmhouse buffalo check ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I then decided how large I wanted it to be, and I made a simple bow. Then using my glue gun, I attached it to the front of the stem. To give it a pop of fall color, I'm then attaching on an orange leaf. To continue on adding my fall theme, I'm using some of the same berry picks that I used in my first project. I once again pulled a few away from the main stem, and then using my glue gun, I randomly attached them to the top of the pumpkin. These are the colors that I chose for my pumpkins, but you can always change them up to match your home decor. To finish up my blue pumpkin, I then added another orange leaf to the back. When I was done, I then followed the exact same instructions for the orange pumpkin, but this time, instead of the buffalo check ribbon, I changed it up and I made a bow out of jute. When I was done, I then used my hot glue gun and attached it to the stem. I added on my berries and another orange leaf in the back, and then continued on to finish my white pumpkin. And this time I'm using an orange polka dot ribbon. I already had this on hand and I did pick this up at Michael's. Once again, I'm making a bow for the front and then attaching it onto the stem with my glue gun. I had a couple of extra pieces of the green tendrils, so I just added those to my pumpkins. And then as a final accent, I wrapped a piece of jute around the top of all 3 of them. And when I'm done, my Dollar Tree pumpkin jars are complete. To start my project, I'm using one of the 14-inch wire wreath forms that I found at the Dollar Tree. While I was at the Dollar Tree, I also picked up 2 rolls of this pretty rusty orange burlap ribbon. I need to attach my ribbon to the form, so using my glue gun, I flipped the form over and I placed some hot glue on one of the supports. I then attached the end of the ribbon, and this will be my starting point as I'm going to wrap the ribbon completely around my wreath form. After I wrapped the ribbon around a few times, I then once again added some hot glue to the form to help hold the ribbon in place. I'm adding the ribbon to the form so I have some place to attach all my accents. I'm using this pretty Dollar Tree ribbon, but you can use any ribbon or fabric that you have on hand as long as it covers the wreath form. I almost made it completely around with the one spool of ribbon, but I didn't, so I just cut a piece from the other and then just hot glued it in that little open space. Now that I have it completely covered, I'm going to start attaching on my accents. For the large accents on the wreath, I'm using these really cute pumpkins that I found at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to use 2 of the off-white, 2 orange, and 1 of the squash. I removed all of their tags, and now using my glue gun, I'm going to attach them evenly spaced around the form. I'm adding an accent sign to the middle, so I'm making sure when I glue them that they're not too close to the center. Once I have all 5 pieces attached, I'm then going to add on a pine cone accent. I picked mine up in the town forest near my home, but the Dollar Tree, they sell some flower picks with pine cones on them, so you can always get them there. Then once again, using my glue gun, I glued a pine cone next to the squash and each of my pumpkins. Once all my pine cones are added, I'm then going to be adding my sign in the center. I found this really cute Farm Fresh Pumpkins sign stake at the Dollar Tree, so I'm going to remove the top part with the truck, and I'm going to be adding that to the inside of my wreath. When it was detached, I simply added it to the center of the wreath, and then I hot glued it into place. When I was done, to cover the burlap ribbon and to add another layer to my wreath, I'm going to be using some of these fall silk Dollar Tree leaves. I once again used my glue gun, and I had no set pattern. I just started randomly gluing the leaves on here and there, making sure that I added enough to cover most of the burlap ribbon. I continued working my way around the wreath, and I even added some of the leaves in between the pumpkins and the pine cones. With my leaves added on, I'm now going to add on a ribbon accent, and I'm using 3 different ribbons from the Dollar Tree. I'm using the red truck with the pumpkins, the sparkly leaves, and some of the plain burlap. To make the ribbon accents, I measured and cut all 3 of my ribbons at 9 inches. When I was done, I then dovetailed the ends, and it's super easy. All I do is fold the ribbon in half and then cut away on the end at an angle. I did this for all 3 of my ribbons, and when I was done, I stacked them. I had the truck on the bottom, the burlap in the middle, and the leaves on the top. I then folded my ribbons in half to find the center, and using a piece of floral wire, I wrapped it around all 3 of the ribbons, and I pulled it tight and twisted it together. I pulled the ribbons apart, so I had my ribbon accent cluster, and once I was done with this one, I ended up making 4 more. To add the ribbons to the wreath, I cut off the excess wire and I folded over the little end. Then using my glue gun, I lifted up the edge of a leaf and I hot glued my ribbons into place. And once again, I worked my way around the wreath. I cut off the excess wire, folded over the little end, and hot glued the ribbons between the pumpkins and the squash. With my ribbons all in place, I'm now going to add on another pumpkin accent, and I picked up these 2 packs at the Dollar Tree. They're pumpkins attached to clips and they just pop right off, and I'm going to end up using 5 of them. To add them to my wreath, I placed some hot glue in the center of my ribbons, and then I placed a small pumpkin in each. After I have all my small pumpkins hot glued into place, I'm now going to add in some of this really pretty fall grass that I found at the Dollar Tree. I'm using 2 bunches, and I separated all the grass from all the individual stems. When I was done, I had a whole handful of little pieces, and so I just took my glue gun and I started gluing them in between all the little nooks and crannies on the wreath. As I was tucking the grass into all the little spaces, I made sure to use my finger protector because using the hot glue and tucking that in there, it was really easy to get burned. Now that all my grass is in place, I'm going to be adding in some of these berry picks from the Dollar Tree. They had orange and black, so I'm going to be using the orange for this wreath. I pulled them out of the package, and each berry's on a separate wire, so I just kind of pulled them apart and opened them up. I'm using 2 packages, and so I have 6 bunches of berries, and all I'm doing is using my glue gun, and I'm hot gluing them evenly around the outside of my wreath. Now that I have all my berries in place around the wreath, and to finish up, I have a handful of pine cones left over, so just like the berries, I'm going to use my glue gun and kind of evenly space them around the outside of my wreath. And now that my last pine cone has been glued into place, my Dollar Tree fall pumpkin wreath is complete. I'm starting my DIY by using one of the Dollar Tree pumpkins. I'm using some white chalk paint, and I just mixed in a little bit of my orange acrylic paint to cover the base of the pumpkin. This will make the exterior more porous, and it will be easier for me to hot glue on the leaves. With the paint dry, I'm now removing the stem, and it pops off really easy. I'm using an assortment of fall leaves from the Dollar Tree. I'm using my hot glue gun, and I'm hot gluing them onto the pumpkin. I'm overlapping the leaves as I glue them on and making sure that I cover up any of the painted surface. I continued working my way around the pumpkin until it was covered in leaves. I'm replacing the stem with a piece of wood, so I'm enlarging the opening. I'm also making a smaller hole in the bottom, and this will be the base for my twine. I measured out 6 double strands and attached one in the top and the other in the bottom, and I continued doing this until all 6 strands were attached. I'm using 4 of the Dollar Tree green leaves, and all I'm doing is hot gluing them around the center opening. For my stem, I'm using a piece of wood that I found outside, and I'm covering it with my twine. While I was attaching it, I did use a little hot glue to help hold the strands in place. When I was done, I used my hot glue gun and I attached it to the center opening on the top. I'm using some leftover flower stems to make the tendrils. I removed them from the base and then twisted the wire around my finger. To finish up my pumpkin project, all I did was slip the tendrils into the top. This pumpkin was super easy to make, and I think it would look great in all different sizes. To make my pumpkin sign, I'm using one of these pictures from the Dollar Tree. After I remove the glass and the backing, I'm using the same chalk paint that I used on my pumpkin to cover the frame. Once it's dry, I'm now going to give it a coat of orange acrylic paint. I'm using this pretty buffalo check ribbon to accent the frame. I cut it to fit and made sure to leave a little extra to hang over the edge. Then all I did was glue it into place. When I was finished, I flipped the frame over and I glued down the tabs. You can always embellish the edges of the frame, but I have so much going on for fall, I just wanted something kind of simple. To finish up this quick and easy project, I added this sweet free pumpkin printout, and I will link that site below. I'm starting with a Dollar Tree rubber ball. It measures about 6 inches wide. And all I'm doing is placing it into a paper bag. I've actually tried to paint these balls in the past, but for some reason the acrylic paint or the spray paint just will never dry. When you're done, leave about 4 or 5 inches, cut off the existing paper bag, and secure it together with a rubber band. Once I was done, I used my glue gun to attach the bag folds together. I'm using some strands of the raffia and I'm hot gluing them onto the paper bag. You don't have to be super fussy. This is basically your base for when you're adding on your larger strands of raffia. Once I glued the front and the sides, and you can see it's not perfect, I then glued the strands onto the back. Depending on the size of your scarecrow will depend on how much raffia you use. I'm taking a large handful and my raffia measures about 55 inches in length. Keep a piece of floral wire handy because you're going to use this to secure it into place. My 55 inches of raffia is folded in half, and now all I'm doing is placing it over the head and dispersing it evenly. Once you have it as full as you like it, and don't worry if it's not perfect because it's a scarecrow, use your floral wire and wrap it around and then secure it into place. There were a few areas here and there, so all I did was take my glue gun and just kind of glue the raffia in place. Once you're done, take a few strands of raffia, tie it around, and cover the floral wire. When that's complete, you're going to use 2 bundles of raffia, each about 20 inches in length, and all you're going to do in the center is take your floral wire and tie it off. To add the arms, you're just going to pull up some of the existing raffia and slide them right inside. To help keep the arms in place, bundle it together underneath the center part of the arms and then use another piece of floral wire and secure it together. With the leg bundle, do the exact same thing. Separate the rest of the hanging raffia. Then attach your legs to the center of the body and secure it in place with a piece of floral wire. To help define the legs, I'm using a couple of strands of raffia and I'm attaching the existing raffia and the raffia I just added as the legs together. Once I had finished my legs, I then did the same thing to the arms. Now that the body's complete, it's time to add her dress. I'm using a piece of fabric that I already had on hand, and it's measuring 20 inches in width and 33 inches in length. I folded it in half, so now it is 16 inches in length, and I'm lying it on the scarecrow with the folded end on the top. To make my neck opening, I cut a tiny slice in the center. Once that was done, I folded my fabric in half and I found my center slice. Using that as my guide, I then cut a small half circle to accommodate her neck. I have the neck now centered on my scarecrow, and using my scissors, I'm cutting up the center of only one piece of the fabric. With that complete, I'm dressing my scarecrow and I'm leaving the opening in the back. Normally, I would sew one of these dresses, and let me tell you, my 8th grade home ec teacher will not be happy, but I'm actually going to make this completely with a glue gun. To make a finished edge, I'm using my hot glue gun, and I'm tacking the 2 ends and the middle of the fabric on both sides. Once that's complete, I'm then hot gluing the two finished seams together. To attach both sides, I left a 6-inch opening for each arm. I then followed the same instructions of tacking each side of the fabric and then hot gluing them together. With her dress complete, I'm now going to add on some accents. I'm using a piece of burlap from the Dollar Tree. I'm wrapping it around her waist and then tying a bow. I'm using buffalo check fabric from the Dollar Tree for her waist accent and her dress hem. On the wrong side of the fabric, I hot glued the edges together to make a waistband. Then starting on the back just before the bow, I hot glued it to the burlap. I then turned her over and attached the rest of the waistband. When I was done, I used my scissors to remove the extra fabric. I found this cute buffalo check ribbon at the Dollar Tree and I'm adding it around her waist as an accent. With everything complete, it's now time to add the hem. With my buffalo check, I'm adding an additional 4 inches to the hem. Once again, all I did was fold over the edge of the dress and hot glue it to the hem. This fabric is only 16 inches in length and I needed double of that. So all I did was match up the pattern and hot glue 2 pieces together. I continued working my way around the dress until it was complete. I'm using some black ribbon that I had in my stash to give her 2 bow shoes. And to do this, all I did was make 2 bows on the bottom part of her legs. I'm giving my scarecrow some hair, and this is completely optional. I'm using some of the natural mesh tubing from the Dollar Tree. I bundled it together and then I secured it in the center with a piece of floral wire. Then using my glue gun, I attached it to her head so they would hang like 2 ponytails. I cut the loops open and then I added some matching Dollar Tree buffalo check ribbon as bows. And yes, that's my crafting buddy Emmeline in the corner who came over to see if I needed any help. I'm using a hat from the Dollar Tree. I'm removing the tag and the accent. I'm adding my black and buffalo check ribbon to the hat. I cut my black ribbon at 56 inches so that it would have 2 long tails off the back. Don't worry about being super fussy when you're adding it because we're going to be covering most of it with some raffia. I'm adding these 3 different colored sunflowers from the Dollar Tree. I simply used my glue gun and hot glued them into place. I'm adding a handful of raffia around the band. I gave it a little twist to kind of hold it into place. I then tucked it under the flowers and then tied off the ends with another piece of raffia. I don't have a crow, but I do have this cute little Dollar Tree bird, so I'm going to add that right onto the hat. I used a thin piece of leftover matching fabric and I made a bow. When I was finished, I then glued that next to the bird. Using the Dollar Tree pearls and a piece of floral wire, I made her a simple pearl necklace. I placed a dot of hot glue on the 2 end beads to hold the necklace together, and then I attached it to my scarecrow. I found this super cute little button in my stash, so I added it to the front of her waistband as an accent. And finally, the last step of this project is to hot glue the hat to her head. I had so much fun making my unusual wreath, and I'm actually starting with a 12-inch basket that someone had thrown away. Using some white spray paint, I covered the front and the back. I'm using a handful of raffia as the base for my wreath. I gathered it in the middle, and I used a little piece of raffia to tie off the center, and then using my hot glue gun, I secured it into place. I'm using the Dollar Tree fall leaves throughout my project, and I'm also using one of their pretty velvet teal pumpkins. I'm attaching 2 leaves to the top of the pumpkin, and I'm hot gluing each under the stem. I have 3 wire corkscrew accents, and I'm hot gluing those on top of the leaves. When I was done, I then hot glued the pumpkin into the center of the basket. I'm pretty much using everything that I already had on hand to make this wreath. I found some of these little vegetables and fruits in my stash, so I'm going to use them to accent the pumpkin. I placed each of them in the basket, and then I hot glued them into place. I had this pumpkin and berry pick, so I'm going to add that as a slight cascade in the front. With all my fruits and vegetables attached, I'm now going to add my flowers. My bow is black and white, so I'm going to incorporate these black twigs into my wreath. I don't have an exact plan in mind, but I thought I would start with the red flowers as my base. I have a huge tote of flowers, and I don't know how I got so lucky, but I found one stem that matched the pumpkin exactly. I got busy and I cut all the flowers from the main stem. The second layer of flowers that I'm adding are the orange eucalyptus. Once those were all in place, I then added the smaller yellow flowers. This was such a fun challenge, and it definitely got me out of my comfort zone. I was so thankful to find these 3 teal flowers, so I'm adding them now, and that will help incorporate the pumpkin into the wreath. With my flowers all added, I'm now going to make a bow, and I'm using a 7/8 inch black and white ribbon. I don't own a bow maker, so I'm going to go old school on this one. I make 2 loops and basically decide how big I want my bow to be. Now that I have my loops, I make sure that I pinch them tightly between my fingers. Then I make a matching loop, I twist the ribbon and then pinch it between my fingers. Then all I do is continue to make a loop, twist the ribbon, and then catch it between my fingers, making sure that I pinch it very tightly as I move along. I never have a set amount of loops that I put in each ribbon. I just kind of judge it as I go along. I've made these same type of bows in some of my other videos, and I'll make sure that they're linked above in case you'd like to check them out. Once my loops are complete, I continue pinching the ribbon together very tightly. Then I take a piece of floral wire and I bend it over the center of the loops. After that, all I do is twist it very, very tightly, and this will hold your bow together. I give it a little fluff and then I cut the tails. With my bow complete, I'm now attaching it to my wreath by using some hot glue. I'm now adding in the black twigs that I cut earlier. By adding these in, for me, it now incorporates the black from the bow into the wreath. I'm using the Dollar Tree fall leaves to fill the voids in between the fruits and the vegetables. I also added a few leaf accents in between the flowers. I found this little scarecrow and he happened to be all the right colors. I thought he would be a super cute accent, so I'm adding him into the wreath. I'm adding some color to the berries and I'm using Anita's Ocean Blue acrylic paint. Once again, I am so lucky I had this paint in my stash and it matches the teal pumpkin perfectly. To finish off the wreath, I'm pulling out as much of the raffia as I can behind the vegetables, the pumpkin, and the fruit. In the areas where there weren't any raffia, I just added some extra in and secured it in place with my glue gun. I bet you're thinking, Laurie, this is one crazy mess, but all I need to do is use my scissors and trim it up. I added a piece of floral wire to the back as a hanger. I wrapped some white floral tape around the wire to give it a finished appearance. I had so much fun making this unusual fall wreath. Definitely different colors than I normally would use, but I absolutely love the way it came out. I'm starting my project by using one of the Farm Fresh calendars from the Dollar Tree. These literally went flying out of the store and luckily I was able to get one of them, so I'm going to use it for this project. I'm using the Happy Harvest, but I thought you might like to see all the cute pictures. I found this frame at the Dollar Tree and it measures a little larger than 12 by 12 and it fits the calendar page inside it perfectly. So I just removed all the wrapping and then I took the frame apart. Now you can leave the black frame as is, but I decided to paint mine gray to complement the stripes on the picture. I then used my gray acrylic paint and I gave the frame a complete coat. Now that my frame has dried, I'm adding in the glass and then I'm placing in the Happy Harvest print. I'm also adding in the frame insert and I'm just turning it upside down. This will give it a little bit of an extra backing and by doing this it will also hide that little hanger hole that's on the print. I think this looks super cute as is, but I'm going to add a few more things to it. I found these pretty white maple leaves at the Dollar Tree and I'm going to use these along with some of the fall colored leaves. I decided which ones I wanted to use and this part is so easy. I just used my glue gun and I glued them into opposite corners. When they were all attached, I then hot glued on the white. With my leaves attached, I'm now going to use some of these little pumpkins that I found at the Dollar Tree. They were each attached to a wire, so I just pulled all 4 of them free. Then, once again, using my glue gun, I attached 2 in each corner. With all the pumpkins in place, I'm going to add on an accent bow, and you can use this farmhouse ribbon from the Dollar Tree. This will work great. I wanted my bow to be a little bit bigger, so I'm using some ribbon that I already had on hand. Then, using my buffalo check ribbon, I just made a simple bow. I cut the ends at an angle, and then using my glue gun, I attached it to the upper corner. To kind of mimic the leaves on a pumpkin, I added a green leaf between each set. To add on another accent, I have this berry pick from the Dollar Tree. They're each individual wires, so I just pulled a few off. Then, using my glue gun, I just randomly added them to both corners. I'm using this as an accent piece on my counter, but you can always add on a hanger. Once all my little berries are added, my Happy Harvest sign is ready to display. I'm starting my fall project by using some pawpaw branches. My pawpaw trees grow so tall and straight, and the bark is so smooth, it's perfect to use for all types of DIY projects. To start my project, I'm cutting a total of 10 14-inch pieces for the side, and for the top and bottom, I'm cutting a total of 8 16-inch pieces. I'm using these pawpaw branches for my project, but I think any straight branches would work great. To make the side of the frame, I've separated the 14-inch pieces, and I'm bundling each end together with some floral wire. Once my wire is attached, I then use some hot glue to help hold them in place. After my 14-inch piece sides are complete, I then do the exact same thing for my 16-inch pieces, top and bottom. Once I'm done, I'm giving all 4 sets a coat of white acrylic paint. Painting them white is completely optional. You can always choose to leave them natural. I'm turning mine into a faux birch. I really like the way it looks, and I use the same technique on a birdhouse that I made before, and you know what? I'll link that video above in case you'd like to check it out. Once all my stick bundles are painted, I'm using the gather sign from the Dollar Tree. I'm removing the hanger and I'm painting that white as well. I painted the back and the front, and I ended up giving it 2 coats of paint. With everything painted, I'm now using some medium gray acrylic paint, and I'm going to turn the white bundles into birch. This is so easy to do. I take a paintbrush and I randomly dab the gray paint here and there. Then, using my finger, I just kind of rub it into the wood. The best part about this is you can't make a mistake. If you dab on too much or not enough, don't worry about it. Just rub it in because, like a birch tree, there's no exact pattern. To make the frame, I'm putting 1 16-inch bundle on the top and 1 on the bottom. I'm then adding a 14-inch bundle on both ends. Then, using my glue gun, I attached the 4 corners together. I'm accenting the corners with this polished hemp, but you can use any type of jute or twine. I placed a dot of hot glue in the corner, and I'm using about 2 feet of hemp. As I'm wrapping, I'm only going in one direction and I'm adding a little hot glue along the way to hold it in place. When I finished, I cut the end and hot glued it to the corner. Once that's complete, I'm following the same instructions, but this time I'm crisscrossing the hemp in the opposite direction. When you finish, you'll have a crisscross X pattern on the corner. You're going to do this on two opposite ends, and this not only looks really cute, but it also helps to hold the frame together. When you're done, the opposite ends have a nice finished look. To embellish the frame, I'm using some flowers, leaves, and pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. I separated the sunflowers from their stems and I removed the leaves. Then, using my glue gun, I attached them to the corner. Once they were in place, I then attached the mini palms. These mini white pumpkins are so cute, and I'm adding in two. I'm adding in some contrast by adding some leaves from the mini palms. And now I'm adding in some of the pretty fall leaf accents. This is so pretty in the fall colors, and if you changed up the sign and the flowers, I think it would be beautiful for any season. After my first corner was complete, I then followed the same pattern for my second. Before I add my gather sign, I'm going to give it a slightly rustic look by using a piece of sandpaper and filing down all the edges. I continued sanding the edges until they looked slightly worn. When I'm done, and to finish up my project, all I need to do is hot glue it into place. And with that, my gather sign is complete. For this project, I'm making some pumpkins out of recycled vegetable tin cans. I'm using 3 16 by 16 pieces of fabric. The green check is actually a napkin, and the other two are pieces of fabric that I found at the Dollar Tree. I'm using some polyfill and I'm placing it around the can that I centered in the middle of the fabric. I took one corner of the fabric and I placed it inside the can. Then, working my way around, I continued gathering the fabric and placing it inside the can until I had my pumpkin shape. I then used my glue gun and attached the pieces of fabric in place. To give my pumpkins a little weight so they don't tip over, I'm using a handful of these glass beads that I already had, but you can always use some rocks or sand or anything that you have on hand. For my pumpkin stems, I'm using some driftwood. If you follow me, you know I have a huge collection. You can always use a group of stems or some cinnamon sticks or anything, just get creative. For my leaves, I'm using 18 inches of the Dollar Tree burlap ribbon. I'm folding it in half to find the center, then folding each end into the middle, slightly overlapping. I gathered it together and secured it with a piece of floral wire. I then used my hot glue gun and attached it in front of the stem. I'm using 28 inches of jute folded in half to make a simple bow and the pumpkin's tendrils. I wrapped the jute around the back of the stem and under one of the leaves, and then I made my bow. When I was done, I then trimmed off the twine. To give my jute a little twist, I'm using some Mod Podge and some pencils. I dabbed some of the Mod Podge on the pieces of my jute. When I was done, I used a piece of tape to attach the jute to the pencil. I rolled it up and I tucked it under the ribbon leaf to dry. When the jute was dry, I unrolled it from the pencils and I opened the curls. Then using my scissors, I gave it a little trim. I decided to decorate my green pumpkin with some fall accents that I had on hand and also using some of the berries from the Dollar Tree. I'm leaving my black and orange pumpkin plain, but for my green pumpkin, I'm randomly adding berries and the fall accent twigs to the top. Once my green pumpkin was complete, I then made my black pumpkin and my orange. I followed the exact same instructions for both of these pumpkins, with the exception of using the brown mesh tubing from the Dollar Tree. I cut the mesh at 18 inches and tied it onto the pumpkin. This time I rolled the mesh tails first, and then I added my Mod Podge. Once again, after they had dried, I unrolled them from the pencils. I moved everything into place, and when I was happy, I then hot glued the bows to the pumpkin. I love the way my Trash to Treasure pumpkins came out. They were easy and inexpensive to make, and no one will ever guess they have a tin can for a base. For my third project, I'm using 2 cream and 2 orange wooden pumpkins that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I'll be turning them around and working on the back, so I removed all of the labels. To brighten up the orange pumpkins just a bit, I gave the top of each a coat of the orange Dollar Tree acrylic paint. I want my pumpkins to have a rustic look, so I'm using this Dollar Tree sanding sponge and I'm sanding down the edges on all 4 of them. Once I have them all sanded, I'm going to place them side to side, making sure that I'm offsetting the stems, and then using my E6000, I'm attaching them all together. I let my pumpkins set up overnight, and now I'm going to use this pretty fall ribbon that I picked up at the Dollar Tree as an accent. I measured my ribbon across my pumpkins. I gave myself a little extra on either end, and then I cut 2 matching pieces to size. I then used my glue gun and ran a bead of glue along the length of the pumpkins and attached my ribbon. When I was done, I turned the pumpkins over and I attached the tail ends on the back. After my first side was complete, I then did the same on my second. To give my sign a little bit more of a rustic look, I'm using some of the jute that I've used in the past projects, and I'm laying a piece across my ribbon and cutting it to size. I'm then following the exact same instructions, adding the jute as I did adding the ribbon. I'm using the Dollar Tree leaves that I used in my Fall Vibes project, and I'm going to hot glue them onto the sign in opposite directions. If you're wondering why I only attached 3 leaves on my sign, it's because I'm using this Dollar Tree pumpkin as the O in my word home, and it's made out of styrofoam, so I just used a knife and I cut it in half. I'm going to give my pumpkin a little accent by cutting some short pieces of jute And then using my glue gun, I'm attaching them in the individual sections. To add my word home to my sign, I'm using the same poster letters that I used in my first project. The letters don't stick tightly against the leaves, so I'm using some of this Aleene's glue that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, and I'm adding a little bit to the back. Now that I have all my letters in place, I'm going to attach the pumpkin as the O with my hot glue gun. I'm adding on a flower accent using these 4 Dollar Tree sunflowers that I had left over from my last wreath project. I'll actually link that below, and after you watch the playlist, you can come on back and check it out. I removed the sunflowers from their stems, and then I glued 2 in the top corner and 2 in the bottom corner. To add my hanger, I cut a matching piece of ribbon, and using my E6000, I glued the 2 ends on the back of my sign. I made a raffia bow like I did in my last project, and I glued that to the side of the ribbon. And with that, my pumpkin fall home sign is complete. I'm starting my recycled project by using this old wooden sign that has definitely seen better days. The first thing I'm going to do is use a piece of sandpaper and sand off all the old chipping paint. I'm going to be painting both the front and the back of the sign, so I made sure to sand off both sides. To cover my sign, I'm using black and white acrylic paint, and I'm using the black to outline the outside of the arrow. When the black was complete, I then filled in the center with the white. I used my Cricut to print out the word pumpkins, and I added it to the front of my sign. I made sure to leave some extra space at one end to accommodate the accents. I found this pretty black and white ribbon for 25 cents at a thrift store, so using my glue gun, I'm going to outline the outside of the arrow. Now that my ribbon is attached in place, I'm going to add on some fall accents, and I'm using some things that I already had on hand, along with some flowers and some pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. I first glued on some berry sticks and my flowers. I'm recycling my old arrow sign, but you can make one for yourself by using one of the arrow signs from the Dollar Tree. I added on a little bunch of raffia that I just tied in half and gave a quick haircut, and then I added on my pumpkins. To finish up, I used some leftover leaves that I had on hand and just attached them here and there around the pumpkins and the flowers. To finish up, I used some buffalo check ribbon. I made a loopy bow and I attached it together with a piece of floral wire. I snipped off the extra wire, I fluffed up the loops, and then using my hot glue gun, I attached it to my sign. And with that, my recycled pumpkin sign is ready to hang. I'm starting my project by using a 28 by 7 heavy metal sign that I thrifted at the Goodwill for $1.99. And I'm also using one of these scarecrow signs from the Dollar Tree. For my paint colors, I'm using orange, barn red, green, and tan. To spell out the word fall, I'm using F and 2 L's, and I picked these letters up at Michael's. And while I was there, I picked up this cute 1/4 inch orange and white polka dot ribbon. I'm giving my sign a complete coat with the tan acrylic paint. When my sign was completely dry, I'm now going to add on the ribbon, and I'll be using my Mod Podge as the glue. I ran my ribbon along the outside edges of the sign and I cut it to size. Now with all 4 pieces of my ribbon cut, I'm using a paintbrush and I'm adding some of the Mod Podge to the outside edges of the sign and then attaching the ribbon. I attached the 2 longest sides first, and then once those were in place, I then attached the 2 ends. I'm going to set that aside and let it dry, and now I'm using my fall red, orange, and green acrylic paint. I decided which color I wanted to paint each letter, and then I gave the front and the sides a complete coat. So once the letters were dry, I wanted to give them a bit of a whitewashed appearance, so I just watered down a bit of my soft white paint, and I gave them each a light coat on the top. I'm using these burlap leaves that I found at the Dollar Tree as the backing for my letters. I want them to be lighter, so once again I'm using my soft white acrylic paint and I'm giving all of them a coat on the front. While those are drying, I'm taking my welcome sign and I'm removing the scarecrow from the top. I'm using my orange and white polka dot ribbon and I'm adding a dot of hot glue under the end of his collar and attaching the end of the ribbon. I added some hot glue along the bottom edge of the scarecrow's collar and then finished attaching my ribbon. When I came to the end, I cut my ribbon and then folded that end underneath the collar. Once I had it all in place, I then just kind of squished together the bottom of the collar to give it that ruffled effect. I'm using some Dollar Tree flowers as an accent, and I'm snipping off 1 orange and 2 yellows from some bunches. Then using my glue gun, I'm attaching them to the front of the scarecrow's hat. I'm using about a 4-inch piece of the orange and polka dot ribbon. I'm folding each side into the center and hot gluing them to make a simple bow. I added some hot glue to the top of the scarecrow's hat just under the flowers. I pinched the bow together and attached it in place. Now that all my pieces are complete, I'm going to lay them out on the sign so that I get the correct placement. Now that I have each piece in place and they're properly centered, I'm using my glue gun and attaching them to the sign. Now that all my pieces are attached, this fall sign is ready for my porch. Well, here we are at the end of the video, and if you've made it, thank you so much for staying with me for almost 2 hours. If you're new to my channel and you enjoyed my videos and you're thinking you'd like to come back and hang out with me again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. And to all my returning friends, I'm truly so thankful for each and every one of you. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody.